Okay, so something about the book, Madarij Al Salikeen. Uh, a lot of this information is actually found by reflecting on the book itself and the mentions of the book. Okay, the mentions of the book in other books. So Ibn al-Qayyim has a habit of referring to his books, by the way. He has a habit of referring to his other books whenever he discusses a matter and he says, we expounded on this point in the book such and such. Okay. Again, this information predominantly is not from myself. Okay. This is researchers. These are people who produced, the printed copies of Madarij Al Salikeen. In Arabic, when they produce a book, they do something called tahqiq. Tahqiq means you sort of take care of the book, meaning you search for the available manuscripts, you study the manuscripts, and you actually study the discrepancies between the manuscripts, and you produce the most complete text of the book. So it's a very thorough study. And also you provide very short commentary, like footnotes of the book. You explain difficult words. You might give references to the verses and the traditions or the hadith that are mentioned. You provide the sources, okay, and references. And you might even add some commentary on the subject matter that is being talked about. So if something needs clarification, needs background, you add it in the footnotes. So this is called tahqiq. It's more like a service. You produce the book in a way that makes it easier for the reader to benefit from it and enjoy it. And obviously the layout of the book. So some of them do more thorough studies of the book. And so a lot of this information actually comes from them. So it seems that Ibn al-Qayyim wrote this book in his 40s. How did they know this? Because Ibn al-Qayyim does mention it or he does refer to it in a book that he wrote in the year 740. Okay, in the year 740, he wrote a book and he refers in the book to Madarij Al Salikeen. So apparently he wrote the book before that. Second thing is that Ibn al-Qayyim does mention in Madarij Al Salikeen another book called Mas'alatul Sama', the issue of listening or hearing. Okay, this was a big issue at his time, and the Sama' means listening or hearing, and it refers to many things. It refers to basically the how our ability to listen and to hear and sort of absorb information through our ears, what's the impact of this on the heart? So it is mentioned in reference to the Quran, it's mentioned in reference to Islamic knowledge, and it's also mentioned in reference to the what's called nasheed, the songs, whether with music or without music, especially those that are used by the mystics and some of the Sufi sects. So in that book, so he refers to the book Mas'alatul Sama' in Madarij Al Salikeen, and it's well proven that he wrote that book Mas'alatul Sama' in the year 732. Hence, through this kind of study, it becomes apparent that Ibn al-Qayyim wrote Madarij Al Salikeen in that period between 732 and 740, and at that time he was in his 40s. He was in his 40s. So that's when Ibn al-Qayyim wrote Madarij Al Salikeen. And by his 40s, that means he was very well mature in his knowledge and his understanding and his practice as well. We can say that the book of Madarij Al Salikeen is a commentary, a very comprehensive commentary on another book, another short book. And that short book is very famous, very well circulated. It's called Manazil Al Sa'ireen. Manazil Al Sa'ireen is by an Imam. His name is Abu Ismail al-Harawi. Abu Ismail al-Harawi. He's from the city of Herat, which is today, in Afghanistan. I think it's called Herat. Herat in Afghanistan. Um, he's obviously of a Persian origin, and he was called Shaykh al-Islam. He was called Shaykh al-Islam. He lived at the time of the Seljuks, and the Seljuk leaders, they really held him in high esteem. Okay, it was the time of Al-Arsalan, the famous Seljuk king, and during the famous Prime Minister Nizamul Mulk, Nizamul Mulk, right? The very famous sort of Prime Minister, or you could say, yeah, something like a Prime Minister at the time, Seljuki. So they really held him in high esteem, and they gave him the title Shaykh al-Islam. Shaykh al-Islam. There are two books that we know from him, which was this Manazil Al Sa'ireen, where he speaks about 100 stations where the heart travels in its worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he calls them manazil. Manazil is the plural of manzil. Manzil is basically a house or a resting place, whether it's temporary or long term. So manazil is where you actually sit for some time. Okay? So he says these are stations that the heart sits in as it travels to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sa'irin is the plural of those who, the travelers, basically. Sa'irin means travelers, those who are moving. So Manazil Al Sa'ireen, and again, Abu Ismail Harawi was a very well-versed worshipper and Sufi. Okay, but he was upon the Sunnah for the most part. Okay, his other book, we said we know of two books of him. The other book is Dhammul Kalami wa Ahlih. He basically, it's a refutation of the people of Kalam, of Ilm al-Kalam and its people. Okay, and he was very aggressive against them, very, very aggressive. Even some Muslim scholars, they say in his aqidah, he's like holding on to the aqidah of Ahl Sunnah, especially with regards to the names and attributes of Allah. He went to extremes of being too literal than the Arabic language allows. But anyways, he really was held in high esteem by Muslim scholars later on. The problem that happened regarding his book, an extreme in his spiritual views. Sometimes, most of them were actually good, but he had one specific area, and Ibn al-Qayyim keeps hammering at that throughout the commentary. Okay, throughout the commentary. We will come to it, inshallah, in the book, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So again, Abu Ismail Harawi passed away in the year 481. So roughly around maybe 300 years, 350 years before Ibn al-Qayyim. Okay, the total pages of the book is actually quite sizable, and there are numerous prints or editions out there in the market. Sometimes it's printed in 3 volumes, sometimes in 4 volumes. The best edition that we have so far is produced, it's here, by Daru Ibn Hazm, this publishing house called Ibn Hazm, and in cooperation with something called a project called Ata'at al-Ilm. Ata'at al-Ilm, they did phenomenal job, because they went to great lengths into getting all the manuscripts of the book and checking them literally letter by letter. Okay. Okay, so in this specific edition, the text, only the text, I'm not talking about the other things, because they provide a lot of sort of supportive lists of topics. the verses that are mentioned, the hadith that are mentioned, the personalities that are mentioned, the books that are mentioned, and everything. The text is about 2,200 pages, 2,200 pages. Okay, this is the full volume. Okay, this is the full volume. It's quite sizable. And roughly, if I show you just an average page, it's pretty full. So let me just do something like this. So that's in Arabic. It's pretty full, but not very crowded. Like the pages are not very crowded. Okay. So yeah, the average volume is between 500 and 600. Some of the biggest volumes reach 650. So it's between, oh yeah, 600 is the average actually. 600 per volume here is the average of the text of the book only. Only the text of the book. Okay, so yeah, structure of the book. And by the way, I probably said this before, but I'll say it again. There have been many attempts to explain the book or comment on the book, and most of them start then sort of like fade away, and there is a reason. So we don't know if this effort is going to continue, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us sincerity and success in this, and hopefully it continues and brings about benefit. The reason is some of the reasons. So let's look at the structure of the book. It does give us something, some indications. The introduction, Ibn al-Qayyim just introduces the book, and his introductions are sometimes long and they are very poetic and literary. So it runs from page 1 to 9, right? But it really tells you in subtle ways what the book is about and some of the reasons why he wrote the book. As I said, his introductions are very literary. He does not mention explicitly why he wrote the book. And then after the introduction, he makes another introduction, which is commentary on Surah al-Fatihah. And it runs for 160 pages. And by the way, this is the reason why many of the commentaries on the book do not continue. Because there is a background for why Ibn al-Qayyim wrote this commentary. We'll come to it. Let me just go through the structure, then we'll come back to the background. So commentary on Surah al-Fatihah, there are 12 subtitles. And really, like for many years, I always felt like I always wondered, why did Ibn al-Qayyim make it hard to get into his book? Why did he write so long? And it's not easy to find the connection to the content of the book. What's the connection between this long introduction, about 160 pages, to the rest of the book? Which actually, it seems out of place. And it seems like it just slows you down and it stands between you and the book. You are tempted to just skip it, which is not necessarily a bad idea, okay? But you always feel guilty since Ibn al-Qayyim put it there, so there must be a point for why he has it there. So, and many of the commentaries, they do skip it. But subhanAllah, it is still very important in a way. So inshallah, as we go through the commentary, what we will do is we will not delve into every aspect of this commentary on Surah al-Fatiha. Some of it we'll just read the text and that's it, but we will just contextualize it and mention why does Ibn al-Qayyim talk about this particularly. The third part of the book is Ibn al-Qayyim did, and this is important to keep in mind. Ibn al-Qayyim set out writing a book of his own, not a commentary. Okay, and this is some kind of a conclusion that is inferred or arrived at by many of those who studied the book, because Ibn al-Qayyim does make a shift at some point. So it's obvious that Ibn al-Qayyim, from the way he started the book and how he introduces the book, that he actually, his initial idea was to write a book on the stations of the heart, which, by the way, pretty much most of them, if not all of them, are actions of the heart. Are actions of the heart. Okay? So Ibn al-Qayyim set out to write a book of his own, an original book. An original book. But somewhere in this third component, right, especially towards the end of it, it seems that Ibn al-Qayyim has changed his mind and decided instead to turn the project into commentary of Manazil Al Sa'ireen, which is very evident in the fourth component of the book, which really makes for the bulk of the book, most of it, okay? And how did we know that he actually started writing his own book? He does say that people have differed about the stations of the heart. They've had many approaches. They've identified different stations of the heart. They ordered them in different ways. They named them in different ways. He said, so we are going to produce a brief book talking about these stations of the heart briefly. So Ibn al-Qayyim really set out to write a brief, small book on the stations of the heart. It was meant to be an original creation. But so in this section, Ibn al-Qayyim does even arrange these stations of the heart in his own way that is not in line with the book of Manazil Al Sa'ireen. Okay, he has his own order of the first 9 stations. But after these 9 stations, he actually follows the same order as Manazil Al Sa'ireen. And in the third component, okay, he does at the beginning, the first few stations of the heart, he does provide his own original text. But somewhere in the middle of them, he actually starts quoting from Manazil Al Sa'ireen and then providing commentary. So the transition happened slowly. And it seems that Ibn al-Qayyim was debating, should I continue with my initial idea or should I just do a commentary? Because doing a commentary seemed to be more feasible, easier, it would give structure to the book. So it seems he went through this debate for a while, and finally he just decided to turn his book into a commentary of Manazil Al Sa'ireen. Again, these are not my conclusions, but they made full sense to me because it was always confusing how Ibn al-Qayyim starts doing something, but then he shifts into something else. Okay? And just to show you why, because one of the 9 stations, the beginning, in component number 3 here, the 9 stations, is Tawbah, the station of Tawbah. And what's really interesting about Tawbah is that Ibn al-Qayyim, so at Tawbah, he starts the station of Tawbah from the page 274, volume number 1. All of it is in volume number 1. From 274 to 610, almost 340 pages. Almost 335, 36 pages. That's only one station, which is at Tawbah. And by the way, that's the longest in the book. There are shorter stations, but so it shows that Ibn al-Qayyim had an idea, but as he engaged with the topics, he realized it's better to adapt and change the approach. Okay, so just having a visual representation of the structure of the book. Right, introduction, as we said, about 9 to 10 pages. About 9 pages. Then Surah al-Fatihah, which is about 160 pages, which actually gives a foundation. it does give a foundation for how Tazkiyah works in Islam. And he draws that from Surah al-Fatihah. So one good thing, like one excellent thing Ibn al-Qayyim did uh, about Tazkiyah is that he managed to reference it back to Surah al-Fatihah. And it seems that this was one of his main intentions, to bring Tazkiyah back to the Quran. So it is connected to the Quran and it has its references in the Quran, and it just, all of it should stem from the Quran. So this is why he spent about 160 pages on Surah al-Fatihah. And most of those who would read this, as I said, they wonder, why did he just put this introduction, which seemed to be uncalled for? But after years of study, it becomes apparent that this was actually a very substantial addition to the whole study of Tazkiyah. He was trying to bring it back to its original sources, the Quran and the Sunnah. Why? This takes us back to, just bear with me. Yeah, takes us back to why he decided to write this commentary on Manazil Al Sa'ireen. Manazil Al Sa'ireen was written, as we said, by Abu Ismail al-Harawi, right? Manazil Al Sa'ireen. And the book caught on. It was received by everyone. And it became very popular, especially the mystics, the worshippers, Sufi orders. Okay? It's very poetic, very highly symbolic. It's a very high level text. Okay? And because it's symbolic and very literary, it is very easy to twist the meanings. And by the way, the commentaries that we know of, the commentaries, okay, books that were written just to comment on Manazil Al Sa'ireen that we know of, and we know of the details of them, are about 28. Most of them are in Arabic, but you will find some in other languages, Persian, Old Persian, and maybe other languages as well. There are other commentaries on it that are without a title. They are just manuscripts without a title, without an author's name. Okay, but the ones that are known are 28. Some of them started as early as like maybe 100 years after the passing of Abu Ismail al-Harawi, and they continue. So many of the Sufi orders that went to extremes, especially those, as we said, who embraced the idea or the false belief of the unity of being, okay, anthropomorphism, technical word for it, that Allah is one with his creation, and the creation is just a manifestation of the creator himself. So there is no real difference between the creation and the creator. Okay, so, and again, this is a false ideology. It is shared, you will find it in Eastern philosophies. All of them believe in this, right? And later on, unfortunately, it made its way into the practice of some Sufi orders. And the Muslim historians refer to them as فلاسفة المتصوفين, the philosophical mystics or Sufis. Okay? Because they were just the worshippers who really did not develop any, like their own, like a different aqidah or a different belief, but the ones who had this kind of philosophical approach to the reality of Allah and to the reality of the creation, unfortunately, they fell into this unity of being. So a lot of those practices, they claimed the book of Abu Ismail al-Harawi to themselves, and they interpreted his words to mean unity of being. And Abu Ismail al-Harawi was opposed to this whole belief, right? So they sort of hijacked his his book, and they hijacked him because he was respected and looked up to even late generations later. So when people heard, oh, this was the Aqidah, unity of being, was actually the belief of Abu Ismail al-Harawi, it sort of added popularity to it. So Ibn al-Qayyim decided to push against it. First, his initial intention was just to produce a book, hopefully that the attention of people will come to this book. But it seems that he realized that the book of Manazil Al Sa'ireen was already so popular and accepted that it would be a better idea to actually bring the book back to its original meanings and correct the mistakes, some of the mistakes of the author, or original author. So hence this was the background of the book and why it was written. But you can see the way we structured the book actually is disproportionate in terms of size, because part number 5 is the biggest, is pretty much most of the book. It's like 3 volumes and a half, whereas the other 3 are just the first half of or the first, even maybe third of the first volume. But this is just a thematic structure of the book. And it's important that we understand this, because, as I said, many people fail to continue with the book because once they get to part number 2, which is the commentary of al-Fatihah, on al-Fatihah, they sort of become disoriented. They don't know what is this for, right? And this is why some people actually just skip it altogether. And again, it's not a bad omission. It makes it easier to get into the book. Another reason why it's difficult, that Ibn al-Qayyim sometimes really speaks at length when it comes to certain stations, like at Tawbah. As we said, it's like about 335 pages talking about at Tawbah. So he delves deep into at Tawbah, and there's a lot of digressions. So let's get to what is the book about? The main themes in the book, okay? The main theme of the book is Tazkiyah. So Ibn al-Qayyim keeps laying foundations. This book is not structured as a textbook. It is structured around the stations. So there is a series of stations of the heart, not in any particular order, right? It's a suggested order, but they can be reordered, no issue. This is the only kind of, I would say, the way the book is structured or organized, the way the book is organized. Okay, so Ibn al-Qayyim keeps laying foundations, methods, and processes with regards to Tazkiyah. Okay, and it is actually a valid approach to take this work, Madarij Al Salikeen, and sort of distill or extract a very organized system of Tazkiyah from it. But it's a huge effort. And I would say the course Tazkiyah Beyond Purification is actually an attempt. It's an attempt at that, but it's not a comprehensive attempt. Okay, it is an attempt of that. It's I would say a moderate size attempt on this, and specifically on capturing the underlying methodology, extracting it, laying it out clearly, and then using it. That would be what the course does, really. So the main theme in the book, which are recurring, is actually Tazkiyah and everything that has to do with it. More particularly, all the stations are actually pretty much are actions of the heart. These stations are actually actions of the heart. And these actions of the heart are associated with feelings or states, right? And also they are associated with speech of the heart. So you will find these connections as he speaks about these stations. Then Ibn al-Qayyim really talks a lot in the book. He calls out deviations from the path of Tazkiyah, which is innovations, heresies, things that are not from the Sunnah, false ideologies, false practices, inaccurate notions. He calls them out and he debates them. And he even traces some of them back to issues in Aqidah. And this is another reason why people find the book difficult, because it seems like Ibn al-Qayyim is going on a tangent when actually he is speaking to the people of his time. So part of the reasons he wrote this book is that he wanted to reclaim Tazkiyah and reclaim one of the most important texts on Tazkiyah back to Ahl Sunnah, because it was like Tazkiyah somehow became associated with Sufism, like Sufism as in the extreme practices. Okay, they became dominant. So even the name Tasawwuf or Sufism was somehow hijacked, mainly by the people who went to extremes, even those who went outside the realm of Islam itself, with like the belief of unity of being. All right. So Ibn al-Qayyim wanted to reclaim Tazkiyah itself to its original foundations in Surah al-Fatihah and in the Quran and the authentic Sunnah. And he wanted to reclaim one of the most popular and standard texts on Tazkiyah, which was written by a person from Ahl Sunnah. He wanted to reclaim that and give it its correct interpretation. So obviously, he calls out all the false interpretations of anything in that text. And he refutes mainly someone called al-Tilimsani. Okay, we probably mentioned him a few times. Ibn al-Qayyim did have his commentary, the full version of his commentary, and he would sometimes even quote some good statements from that commentary, because that Tilimsani guy was very, very intelligent. And he was a very learned person, but he would refute him when it comes to the deviations. And he would call him out, and not necessarily by mentioning his name, but he would refer to them as Ahl Wahdat al-Wujud, the people of Wahdat al-Wujud, the people who claim the unity of being. Right? I think that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it about the book. I should be joining the prayer now in a minute. But hopefully this gives us a background on the book, why it was written, what are the main themes, the topics, the very simple kind of structure of the book. And hopefully this gives us an easy introduction into the book, and it helps you be patient when we come to the longer parts that might not make sense. Okay, so again, a word of warning: this, you should not treat this as some sort of as a clearly structured book. No, I would say the one thing that keeps you engaged with the book is realize that, you know, we want to capture the vibe, the spirit of the book. Because Ibn al-Qayyim, like in terms of the quality of writing, in terms of what you get, what you feel in your heart as you read the book, this, in my estimation, this is the best book by Ibn al-Qayyim by far, in terms of giving your heart the taste and putting your heart in the state that is induced by that station. So my assessment is that when Ibn al-Qayyim wrote in this book, he would actually be in that state, and he would let his state, the state of his heart, flow through his pen into his writing. Really, every time I read this book, it puts me in a state. So we want to try to capture that as much as possible, and consider this to be your main takeaway from the book. Okay? Then along with that comes a lot of information, a lot of this subtle distinctions, a lot of nuances, a lot of enlightening ideas, a lot of breakthroughs. That's going to come along, but when? Allah knows. It happens all the time. And really, the books of Ibn al-Qayyim in general have this, they have this quality about them. And particularly Madarij Al Salikeen stands out by far. Stands out by far. There will be exceptions throughout the book when he gets in debates. He does bring about debatable issues and he debates them. And that's sort of like, you feel that you lost the momentum, but it actually gives a good break. And we're not going to dwell so much where Ibn al-Qayyim goes on a tangent, right? We're not going to dwell so much on that. We'll just, because we don't need to refute these people. And you have to remember, he's actually speaking to the people of his time. So they had common practices, common beliefs that he's fighting on, pushing against, that we don't have them today, alhamdulillah. So we don't need to go deeper into that. But we will just read the text. And if there is a need, we just say, okay, there was this historically, and this is what he dealt with. This is why he speaks about this. No need to dig deeper into this, inshaAllah ta'ala.